Isabella Rivera had always been beautiful, but she never really understood the power of her beauty until she turned 26. Every morning, when she looked in the mirror while getting ready for work, she saw the same person she had always been. Auburn hair that caught the sunlight just right, green eyes that seemed to sparkle with their own light, and a smile that could make strangers stop in their tracks. But to Isabella, she was just a regular woman trying to make her way in the world. She worked at the downtown Seattle Art Gallery, a small but prestigious place called Modern Expressions. The job didn't pay much, but Isabella loved being surrounded by beautiful paintings and sculptures every day. She had studied art history in college and dreamed of one day curating exhibitions that would inspire people the way great art had always inspired her. Most days, Isabella took the bus to work because she couldn't afford a car on her gallery salary. She lived in a tiny apartment above a coffee shop, where the smell of fresh roasted beans drifted up through her floorboards every morning. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and she had worked hard to make it feel like home with thrift store furniture and prints of her favorite paintings. The gallery attracted all kinds of visitors: art lovers, tourists, students, and sometimes people who just wandered in from the street. Isabella had gotten used to the way men looked at her when she gave tours or explained the history behind certain pieces. Some were respectful and genuinely interested in the art. Others made her uncomfortable with their stares and comments that had nothing to do with paintings. Her co-worker Lisa often joked that Isabella could have married any of the wealthy collectors who visited the gallery. "Girl, you could be living in a mansion instead of that tiny apartment," Lisa would say with a laugh. But Isabella had always been independent. She wanted to earn her own way in life, not depend on someone else's money. On Tuesday mornings, Isabella usually arrived at the gallery early to prepare for the week ahead. She liked the quiet time before visitors arrived, when she could walk through the exhibition rooms and really look at the art without distractions. The morning light streaming through the large windows made everything look magical. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Isabella unlocked the gallery doors, turned on the lights, and began her usual routine of checking that everything was perfect for the day ahead. She was adjusting a painting that had gotten slightly crooked when she heard heavy footsteps on the polished floor behind her. "Excuse me," came a deep voice that seemed to rumble from somewhere far below. Isabella turned around and had to look up, way up. The man standing behind her was easily the tallest person she had ever seen in real life. He had to be at least 6 feet 8 inches, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive black suit perfectly. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes were intense in a way that made Isabella feel like he was seeing right through her. "I'm sorry, we're not open yet," Isabella said, wondering how he had gotten in. She was sure she had locked the door behind her. "The door was unlocked," he said, though Isabella was certain that wasn't true. "I'm Vincent Kane. I own Kane Construction." Isabella had heard of Kane Construction. They built half the skyscrapers in Seattle. This man wasn't just tall and handsome, he was also incredibly wealthy. She could tell from his watch alone, which probably cost more than she made in a year. "I'm Isabella. I work here." She gestured around the gallery. "What can I help you with?" Vincent's eyes never left her face as he spoke. "I've been watching this gallery for a while. I'm interested in adding some pieces to my private collection." Something about the way he said "watching" made Isabella feel a little uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. Rich collectors often scouted galleries for months before making purchases. "What kind of art interests you?" Isabella asked, slipping into her professional mode. "Beautiful things," Vincent said, and the way he looked at her made it clear he wasn't just talking about paintings. "Things that deserve to be protected and cherished." Isabella felt her cheeks warm under his intense stare. She had dealt with flirtatious customers before, but there was something different about Vincent. He wasn't crude or disrespectful like some men. Instead, he seemed genuinely captivated by her, as if she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. "Let me show you around," Isabella said, trying to maintain her professional composure. As they walked through the gallery, Vincent asked thoughtful questions about the artists and their techniques. He clearly knew about art, which impressed Isabella. Most wealthy collectors she met bought pieces based on investment potential, rather than genuine appreciation for the work. But even as they discussed paintings and sculptures, Isabella could feel Vincent's eyes on her constantly. When she explained the symbolism in a particularly complex piece, he watched her face instead of looking at the artwork. When she reached up to point out details in a tall painting, she caught him staring at the graceful way she moved. "You really love this, don't you?" Vincent asked as Isabella finished explaining the history behind a Renaissance reproduction. "I do," Isabella said, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "Art has the power to make people feel things they didn't know they could feel. It connects us to something bigger than ourselves." "I can see why," Vincent said quietly. "You light up when you talk about it." Isabella felt that warm feeling in her cheeks again. Most people thought her passion for art was impractical or boring, but Vincent seemed to find it genuinely attractive. They spent over an hour walking through the gallery together. Vincent asked about Isabella's background, her education, her dreams for the future. He listened to her answers with an intensity that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. No one had ever paid such focused attention to what she had to say. When other visitors started arriving, Vincent purchased 3 expensive pieces without even haggling over the prices. As Isabella wrote up the sales paperwork, he leaned against the counter, making her feel small next to his massive frame. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" he asked as she handed him the receipt. Isabella hesitated. She had a policy about not dating customers, but Vincent didn't feel like a regular customer. There was something magnetic about him that drew her in despite her usual caution. "I don't usually," she began. "Just dinner," Vincent said. "I know a place that serves the best Italian food in the city. We can talk more about art." Against her better judgment, Isabella found herself saying yes. That evening, Vincent picked her up in a black luxury car that was longer than her entire apartment. The restaurant he chose was the kind of place Isabella had only read about in magazines. The maitre d' knew Vincent by name and led them to a private table in a corner where they could talk without being overheard. Vincent was a perfect gentleman throughout dinner. He pulled out her chair, ordered wine that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent, and listened intently as she told him about growing up in a small town and working her way through college. He seemed genuinely interested in every detail of her life. "What about you?" Isabella asked as they shared a dessert that looked too beautiful to eat. "How did you get into construction?" Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "I grew up poor, really poor. I learned early that if you want something in this life, you have to take it and hold on to it tight. Otherwise, someone else will take it from you." There was something in his voice that made Isabella think he wasn't just talking about business success. But before she could ask what he meant, Vincent was smiling again and asking about her favorite artists. When he drove her home that night, Vincent walked her to her apartment door like an old-fashioned gentleman. He didn't try to invite himself or pressure her for anything more than a goodnight kiss on the cheek. "I'd like to see you again," he said, his large hand gently touching her face. "I'd like that too," Isabella admitted. As she watched his expensive car disappear down the street, Isabella felt butterflies in her stomach for the first time in years. Vincent Kane was unlike any man she had ever met. He was successful, sophisticated, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and dreams. What Isabella didn't know was that Vincent had been watching her for months before that Tuesday morning encounter. He had studied her daily routines, learned about her job and her life, and carefully planned their accidental meeting. He had even paid the gallery's security company to delay their morning round so he could get inside before Isabella arrived. Vincent Kane was a man who always got what he wanted, and from the moment he had first seen Isabella Rivera giving a tour to a group of college students 3 months earlier, he had wanted her more than anything he had ever desired in his life. The hunt had begun, though Isabella had no idea she was the prey. The flowers started arriving the next morning. Not just any flowers, but rare orchids that Isabella had mentioned loving during their dinner conversation. They came with a simple note: "Beautiful things deserve beautiful surroundings. Vincent." Isabella, had barely finished reading the card when her phone rang. Vincent's deep voice filled her tiny apartment as he asked about her day and whether she liked the flowers. No man had ever remembered such a small detail from their conversation, let alone acted on it so quickly. "They're gorgeous," Isabella said, touching the delicate petals. "But you really didn't need to." "I wanted to," Vincent interrupted gently. "I've been thinking about our conversation all night, about what you said about art connecting people to something bigger than themselves." Over the next few weeks, Vincent's attention became a constant presence in Isabella's life. He called every morning to wish her a good day at work. He sent lunch to the gallery from expensive restaurants, always including something sweet because he had noticed Isabella's weakness for desserts. He showed up at closing time to drive her home, claiming it wasn't safe for her to take the bus after dark. At first, Isabella was flattered by the attention. No one had ever made her feel so special, so worthy of such thoughtful gestures. Vincent remembered everything she told him and seemed to anticipate her needs before she even knew she had them. "Girl, you've got yourself a real prince," Lisa said one afternoon as they watched Vincent's driver deliver another elaborate flower arrangement. "I've never seen a man so devoted." Isabella smiled. But something was starting to feel different about Vincent's devotion. It was becoming intense. When she mentioned a coworker named Daniel who had helped her hang a difficult exhibition, Vincent's expression had turned dark and cold. He asked detailed questions about Daniel's job, his relationship status, and why Isabella had needed his help instead of asking Vincent. "I could have helped you," Vincent said, his large hand gripping hers a little too tightly. "You don't need other men when you have me." Isabella laughed nervously. "Vincent, it was just work. Daniel is married with kids, he was just being helpful." But Vincent didn't seem convinced. The next day, Daniel mentioned that a large man in an expensive suit had been asking questions about him in the coffee shop across from the gallery. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine, but when she asked Vincent about it, he claimed to have no idea what she was talking about. The gifts kept coming, each one more expensive than the last. Designer clothes that fit Isabella perfectly, though she had never told Vincent her size. Jewelry that cost more than she made in months. A new laptop when her old one broke, delivered to her apartment before she had even mentioned the problem to anyone. "How did you know my computer died?" Isabella asked when Vincent called that evening. "Lucky guess," he said. "You mentioned it was old and slow. I figured you might need an upgrade." But Isabella was sure she had never mentioned her computer problems to Vincent. She had only discovered it wasn't working that morning when she tried to check her email. The timing felt too convenient, too planned. Vincent's visits to the gallery became more frequent. He would arrive unannounced, claiming to browse the new exhibitions, but Isabella noticed he spent more time watching her than looking at the art. When male customers tried to engage her in conversation about the paintings, Vincent would somehow appear at her side, his massive presence making other men uncomfortable enough to move along quickly. "He's very protective of you," Lisa observed one afternoon after Vincent had intimidated away a friendly tourist who had been asking Isabella about local artists. Protective was becoming the word everyone used to describe Vincent's behavior. Isabella's friends thought it was romantic. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, said Isabella was lucky to have found a man who cared so much about her safety. Even Isabella's mother, during their weekly phone calls, seemed impressed by Vincent's devotion. But late at night, alone in her apartment, Isabella sometimes felt suffocated by all the attention. She couldn't go anywhere without Vincent knowing about it. He always seemed to have reasons why certain places weren't safe, certain people weren't trustworthy, certain activities weren't suitable for someone as special as her. When Isabella mentioned wanting to take a weekend art history course at the community college, Vincent frowned. "Why would you need more education? You already know more about art than most people with advanced degrees." "I just enjoy learning," Isabella explained. "Plus, it might help me get promoted at the gallery." "You don't need a promotion," Vincent said firmly. "I can give you anything you want. Why work so hard for something so small when you could have so much more?" That conversation planted a seed of unease in Isabella's mind. Vincent seemed to have very specific ideas about what she should and shouldn't do with her life, Ideas that always seemed to involve less independence and more dependence on him. The turning point came when Vincent made his proposition. They were having dinner at another expensive restaurant, this one on the top floor of one of his buildings. The view of Seattle's skyline was breathtaking, but Isabella found herself more focused on the intensity in Vincent's blue eyes as he spoke. "I've been thinking about our future together," Vincent said, reaching across the table to take her hand, in both of his. "I want to offer you something that could change your life." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. Was he about to propose? They had only been dating for 2 months, which felt too soon. But there was something about the way Vincent looked at her that made her think he was ready to take their relationship to the next level. "I'm building a private art collection," Vincent continued. "The finest pieces money can buy. I want you to manage it for me, full-time. The salary would be 3 times what you make at the gallery." Isabella blinked in surprise. This wasn't what she had expected. That's an incredible offer, Vincent. But I love working at the gallery, and I'm not sure I'm qualified to manage a major private collection." "You're more qualified than, you know," Vincent said, his grip on her hand tightening. "And you're wasting your talents in that little gallery, working for people who don't appreciate what they have." The way he said it made Isabella feel like he was talking about more than just her job. There was possessiveness in his voice that made her uncomfortable. "It's a generous offer," Isabella said carefully. "But can I think about it?" Vincent's expression darkened for just a moment before he smiled again. "Of course, but don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often." That night, Isabella lay awake thinking about Vincent's offer. The money was tempting, especially since she could barely afford her rent most months. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. Managing his private collection would mean working only for him, seeing only him, depending entirely on him for her livelihood. She tried to imagine what that life would look like and found herself thinking of a beautiful bird in a golden cage, fed the finest food, surrounded by luxury but unable to fly. When Vincent called the next morning, as he did every morning, Isabella told him she needed more time to consider his offer. "Time for what?" Vincent asked, and there was an edge to his voice that Isabella had never heard before. "What's there to think about? I'm offering you everything you could want." "It's a big decision," Isabella said. "I just need to... You need to trust me," Vincent interrupted. "I know what's best for you better than you do. I can give you a life most women only dream about." After that conversation, Isabella started paying closer attention to Vincent's behavior. She noticed how he steered conversations away from her friends and family, how he always had reasons why she shouldn't attend gallery events without him, how he knew details about her life that she was sure she had never shared. The final straw
came when Isabella's college friend Rachel visited from Portland.
Isabella was excited to show Rachel around Seattle and catch up on old times. But when she mentioned her plans to Vincent, his reaction was immediate and intense. "Cancel it," he said flatly. "What?" Isabella couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Your friend can visit another time. I have plans for us this weekend." "Vincent, I haven't seen Rachel in 2 years. I'm not canceling." Vincent's face went completely still. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet and controlled in a way that was somehow more frightening than if he had yelled. "Isabella, I don't think you understand how much I care about you, how much I worry about your safety. The world is full of people who would use you, hurt you, take advantage of your trusting nature. I'm trying to protect you from all of that." "Protect me from my college friend? Protect you from anyone who doesn't have your best interests at heart the way I do." Standing in her tiny apartment, looking up at Vincent's towering frame, Isabella felt truly small for the first time since they had met. Not small in a way that made her feel cherished and protected, but small in a way that made her feel trapped. That weekend, she spent time with Rachel despite Vincent's disapproval. It felt like breathing fresh air after being in a stuffy room. Rachel reminded Isabella of who she used to be before Vincent's attention had consumed her life. Someone with dreams and ambitions that didn't revolve around one man's vision of her future. But even as she laughed with her friend and enjoyed their time together, Vincent's estate was like something out of a fairy tale. The mansion sat on 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, surrounded by tall iron gates that looked decorative but were clearly designed for security. Isabella had driven past places like this before but never imagined she would actually live in one. The art collection Vincent wanted her to manage was incredible. Paintings worth millions hung in climate-controlled rooms. Sculptures that belonged in museums were displayed in private galleries throughout the house. For someone who loved art the way Isabella did, it should have felt like paradise. But paradise, Isabella quickly learned, could also be a prison. Vincent showed her to her quarters on the second floor. The suite was larger than her entire old apartment, with a bedroom, sitting area, and private bathroom that was bigger than most people's kitchens. Everything was decorated in soft colors and expensive fabrics. Fresh flowers were arranged on every surface. "This is beautiful," Isabella said, running her hand along the silk curtains. "But I thought, are we not?" Vincent's smile was gentle but firm. "I want to do this right, little bird. You'll have your own space until we're properly married. I respect you too much to rush things." The word married hung in the air between them. Vincent spoke about their future marriage as if it was already decided, as if Isabella's agreement was just a formality. She hadn't said yes to a proposal because he had never actually asked. He simply assumed. "When did we decide to get married?" Isabella asked carefully. "The moment I saw you," Vincent said, his large hands cupping her face. "Some things are just meant to be. You belong with me, Isabella. You belong to me." The way he said "belong to me" made Isabella's stomach twist, but she pushed the feeling down. Vincent loved her. He was offering her a life most women would envy. She was being silly to worry about his choice of words. The first few days at the Eusteward estate felt like a luxurious vacation. Isabella spent her time cataloging Vincent's collection, creating detailed records of each piece's history and value. The work was fascinating, and she had access to art books and research materials she had only dreamed of having before. Vincent left for work each morning in his expensive suit, kissing Isabella goodbye like they were already married. He came home for lunch every day, something he claimed he had never done before meeting her. In the evenings, they would have dinner together in the mansion's formal dining room, served by a staff that seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. But, slowly, Isabella began to notice things that made her uncomfortable. The estate's security system was far more elaborate than she had initially realized. Cameras were everywhere, both inside and outside the house. Vincent explained that they were necessary for protecting his valuable art collection, but Isabella often felt like she was being watched, even when she was alone. The internet in the house was restricted. Isabella discovered this when she tried to check her personal email and found that certain websites were blocked. When she asked Vincent about it, he explained that it was for security reasons. "Hackers target wealthy people," he said. "I can't risk them getting access to our private information through unsecured connections." Isabella's phone had mysteriously stopped working properly after her first week at the estate. Calls would drop, messages wouldn't send, and the GPS seemed to malfunction constantly. Vincent immediately bought her a new phone, but this one came with parental controls that limited what she could access. "It's the latest security software," Vincent explained when Isabella noticed the restrictions. "It protects against identity, theft, and malware." When Isabella wanted to visit Lisa at the gallery to pick up some personal items she had left behind, Vincent insisted on driving her himself. He waited in the car while she went inside, but Isabella could see him watching through the gallery windows the entire time. Lisa pulled Isabella aside while she gathered her things. "Are you okay? You seem different." Isabella wanted to explain how she was feeling, but the words wouldn't come. How could she complain about living in luxury? How could she say she felt trapped when Vincent gave her everything she could want? "I'm fine," Isabella said, just adjusting to a new life. But Lisa's concerned expression stayed with Isabella long after they left the gallery. That night she tried to call Lisa from her new phone, but the call wouldn't go through. When she asked Vincent about it, he said there must be a problem with the cell tower in their area. Isabella's contact with the outside world gradually dwindled to almost nothing. Her old friends stopped calling because she never seemed to be available when they reached out. Her family's weekly phone calls became monthly, then stopped altogether when Isabella repeatedly had to cancel or cut them short. because Vincent needed her for something important. The isolation happened so slowly that Isabella didn't fully realize it was happening until it was almost complete. Vincent always had reasonable explanations for why she couldn't do certain things or see certain people. Her old life began to feel like something that had happened to someone else. Vincent's control extended to the smallest details of Isabella's daily routine. He decided what she should wear each day, choosing outfits that he said complimented her natural beauty. He planned their meals based on what he believed was healthiest for her. He scheduled her exercise routine with a personal trainer who came to the estate 3 times a week. "I want you to be happy and healthy," Vincent would say whenever Isabella questioned these arrangements. "Let me take care of you the way you deserve to be taken care of." But Isabella was starting to realize that Vincent's idea of taking care of her meant making every decision for her. She wasn't consulted about her own preferences. Her opinions were heard but rarely honored if they differed from what Vincent thought was best. The breaking point came when Isabella received an unexpected phone call on the estate's landline. It was David Chen, the curator from the Museum of Modern Art. Isabella had applied for a position there months before meeting Vincent and had completely forgotten about it. "Ms. Rivera, I have wonderful news." David's voice was excited. "We'd like to offer you the position of Associate Curator of Contemporary Art. It's exactly what you applied for, and we were impressed by your qualifications." Isabella felt her heart leap. This was her dream job, the kind of position she had worked toward her entire career. The Museum of Modern Art was prestigious and respected. Working there would open doors she had never imagined possible. "That's incredible," Isabella said, trying to keep her voice down. "When would you need an answer?" "Well, we were hoping you could start next month. I know it's short notice, but we have a major exhibition planned and we need someone with your expertise to help coordinate it." Isabella's mind raced. Next month, she could leave the estate, return to the art world she loved, work with colleagues who shared her passion. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe deeply. "Can I call you back tomorrow?" Isabella asked. "I need to discuss this with someone." After David hung up, Isabella sat by the phone feeling more alive than she had since moving to the estate. This was her chance to reclaim her independence, to remember who she was before Vincent's overwhelming presence had consumed her identity. But when Vincent came home that evening, his mood was darker than usual. He barely spoke during dinner, his blue eyes cold and distant. Isabella waited until they were alone in the living room to tell him about the job offer. Vincent's reaction was immediate and intense. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Isabella felt like she had been slapped. "What do you mean, absolutely not? This is my dream job, Vincent. This is everything I've worked for." "You work for me now," Vincent said, standing up to his full, intimidating height. "You have responsibilities here. You have a commitment to me and to my collection." "I can do both," Isabella said desperately. "The museum job is only part-time to start. I don't share, little bird," Vincent interrupted, his voice carrying a warning that made Isabella's blood run cold. "I thought I had made that clear." The way he said it made Isabella realize that this wasn't really about the job or the art collection. This was about ownership. Vincent didn't want a partner or even a wife in the traditional sense. He wanted a possession, something beautiful that belonged only to him. "I'm not asking you to share me," Isabella said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm asking you to support my career." Vincent moved closer, his massive frame looming over her. "Your career is here with me, taking care of my collection, being my wife. That's enough for any woman. But it's not enough for me," Isabella said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Vincent's face went completely still. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Isabella's rapid heartbeat. When Vincent finally spoke, his voice was soft and controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than if he had shouted, "I think you're confused, little bird. I think you've forgotten how good I've been to you, how much I've given you, how much I love you." He reached out to touch her face, but Isabella flinched away. Vincent's hand froze in midair, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I see," he said quietly. "You need some time to remember how grateful you should be." The next morning, Isabella woke up to discover that her access to the Isabella had been living at Vincent's estate for 3 months when she decided she had to escape. The decision didn't come all at once. It built slowly, like pressure in a kettle, until she couldn't ignore it anymore. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday morning. Isabella was cataloging a new shipment of paintings when she found something that made her blood turn cold. Hidden behind one of the canvases was a manila folder with her name on it. Inside were dozens of photographs, pictures of her walking to work at the gallery, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. Photos of her having coffee with Lisa, eating lunch alone, waiting for the bus. Some of the pictures were dated from months before she had ever met Vincent. He had been watching her, studying her, planning his approach long before their accidental meeting at the gallery. There were also documents in the folder, copies of her bank statements, her employment records, even her college transcripts. Vincent had investigated every aspect of her life before introducing himself. Their entire relationship had been built on lies and manipulation. Isabella's hands shook as she flipped through the evidence of Vincent's stalking. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note in Vincent's precise script. "Mine from the first moment I saw her. No one else will ever have her." The note was dated 6 months ago, long before their first date. Vincent had decided to possess her before they had even spoken. Everything that followed had been part of an elaborate plan to isolate and control her. Isabella quickly hid the folder where she had found it and tried to act normal for the rest of the day. But inside, she was screaming. Every smile Vincent gave her at dinner felt like a lie. Every gentle touch felt like a violation. When he called her "little bird" that evening, Isabella had to excuse herself to the bathroom to keep from being sick. That night, she began planning her escape in earnest. She couldn't use her phone or the internet without Vincent monitoring her communications. She couldn't ask the staff for help because they all reported back to him. She couldn't simply walk out the front gate because the security system would alert Vincent immediately. But Isabella had been studying the estate for months while cataloging Vincent's art collection. She knew about the service entrance that delivery trucks used. She knew which cameras covered which areas. She knew the guards' patrol schedules. Most importantly, she had discovered a small amount of cash hidden in Vincent's study while organizing his papers. Not enough to live on long term, but enough to get away. The hardest part was acting normal around Vincent while planning her escape. He was already suspicious of her mood since their argument about the museum job. Isabella forced herself to smile, to laugh at his jokes, to let him hold her hand during their evening walks around the estate grounds. Inside, she felt like she was dying a little more each day. Vincent's behavior was becoming more possessive and controlling as the weeks passed. He had started checking on her multiple times during the workday, appearing in whatever room she was working in with excuses about wanting to see how she was doing. He questioned her about every conversation she had with the staff members. He even began choosing her clothes each morning, laying them out on her bed like she was a child who couldn't dress herself. "I just want you to look your best," Vincent said when Isabella protested. "You're so beautiful, little bird. I want everyone to see how perfect you are." But Isabella was beginning to understand that Vincent's compliments were really about ownership. He didn't want her to look beautiful for herself or even for him. He wanted her to look like a perfect possession that reflected well on his taste and wealth. Isabella's escape plan started to come together when she remembered something Vincent had mentioned about an upcoming business trip. He was flying to Vancouver to inspect a major construction project that was behind schedule. He would be gone for 3 days, the longest period they had been apart since she moved to the estate. 2 weeks before the trip, Isabella began preparing. She hid small amounts of cash from various places around the house. She memorized bus schedules and identified a women's shelter downtown that helped victims of domestic abuse. She researched how to obtain a restraining order and what evidence she would need. The most difficult part was maintaining her facade with Vincent. He seemed to sense that something was different about her, even though Isabella thought she was being careful. His questions became more pointed. His watching became more intense. He started asking her to account for every minute of her day. "You seem distant lately," Vincent said one evening as they sat in his study. "Are you unhappy about something?" Isabella forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm just tired. Managing the collection is more work than I expected." "Maybe you need a vacation," Vincent said, but there was something in his voice that made Isabella think he wasn't really offering her a choice. "We could take a trip together, somewhere private where we can focus on each other." The idea of being even more isolated with Vincent made Isabella's skin crawl. "That sounds nice," she lied. "But maybe after you get back from Vancouver." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. "How did you know about Vancouver? I don't remember mentioning that trip to you." Isabella's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "You mentioned it last week when you were on the phone with your office. I was in the room organizing your books." It was a believable explanation, but Isabella could see that Vincent wasn't entirely convinced. From that moment on, she felt his surveillance intensify. He started appearing at unexpected times, as if he was trying to catch her doing something suspicious. 3 days before Vincent's departure, Isabella made a terrible mistake. While moving a painting in his study, she accidentally knocked over a small decorative box on his desk. When she picked it up, several items fell out, including a set of keys she didn't recognize. One of the keys was clearly for a safety deposit box. Another looked like it might fit a filing cabinet. But it was the third key that made Isabella's blood run cold. It was small and silver, the kind used for luggage locks or small storage boxes. Isabella quickly put everything back and tried to act like nothing had happened. But that evening at dinner, Vincent was watching her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see inside her mind. "You've been very quiet tonight, little bird," Vincent said as they finished their meal. "Just thinking about work," Isabella replied. "What kind of work requires so much thinking?" Vincent's tone was casual, but Isabella could hear the steel underneath. "I'm trying to figure out the best way to display the new paintings you acquired. The lighting in the East Gallery isn't quite right for the period pieces." It was a safe topic that allowed Isabella to talk about something she actually knew about. Vincent seemed satisfied with her answer, but Isabella noticed he palmed the small silver key when he thought she wasn't looking. The night before Vincent's departure, he came to Isabella's room earlier than usual. He stood in the doorway longer than normal, his blue eyes scanning her face as if he was memorizing it. "I'm going to miss you while I'm gone," he said. "I'll miss you too," Isabella lied. "Will you?" Vincent stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Sometimes I wonder if you're really happy here, little bird. Sometimes I think you might be planning to fly away." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to look confused. "Fly away? Vincent, this is my home now. Where would I go? I don't know," Vincent said, moving closer. "But if you ever did try to leave me, I want you to understand something very important." He sat on the edge of her bed, his massive frame making the mattress dip. When he reached out to touch her face, Isabella had to force herself not to flinch. "Would find you," Vincent said softly. "No matter where you went, no matter how far you ran, I would find you and bring you home. Because you belong to me, Isabella. You're mine in every way that matters." The threat was delivered in the same gentle tone Vincent used when he told her he loved her. But there was no mistaking what it was. He was warning her not to try to escape and promising terrible consequences if she did. "I understand," Isabella whispered. "Good," Vincent said, kissing her forehead like she was a child. "Sweet dreams, little bird." After he left, Isabella lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Vincent suspected something, but he was still planning to leave for Vancouver in the morning. This might be her only chance to get away. If she didn't take it, she might never get another opportunity. The next morning, Vincent left for the airport at 6 a.m. Isabella watched from her bedroom window as his car disappeared through the estate gates. For the first time in months, she was alone without his constant surveillance. But Isabella knew she couldn't act immediately. Vincent would be suspicious if anything went wrong too soon after his departure. She forced herself to go through her normal routine, cataloging art and eating meals with the staff. She waited until evening to begin putting her escape plan into action. At 9 p.m., when the night shift guards began their rounds, Isabella put on dark clothes and gathered the small amount of cash and identification she had managed to collect. She knew she had a narrow window of time to reach the service entrance while the guards were checking the far side of the property. Everything went wrong at once, as Isabella crept through the mansion's halls, trying to avoid the security. The 3 days that followed Isabella's failed escape attempt were the worst of her life. Vincent didn't hurt her physically, but the psychological torture was unbearable. He watched her every second, following her from room to room like a shadow. He had installed additional cameras in her bedroom and bathroom, claiming it was for her safety and security. "You can't be trusted on your own anymore, little bird," Vincent explained as workers installed the new surveillance equipment. "You've proven that you make poor decisions when I'm not here to guide you." Isabella's phone was taken away completely. Her access to the internet was cut off entirely. Even her movements within the estate were restricted. She was no longer allowed in Vincent's study or any room that contained a landline phone. A guard now accompanied her whenever she left her bedroom, claiming it was to assist her with her daily activities. Vincent had also destroyed her identification documents. Her driver's license, passport, and social security card had all mysteriously disappeared from her room. When Isabella asked about them, Vincent claimed they must have been misplaced during a routine security check. "Don't worry," he said with that cold smile she had learned to hate. "I'll get you new ones when you've proven you can be trusted again." But Isabella knew that without identification, she couldn't open a bank account, rent an apartment, or even get a job if she somehow managed to escape. Vincent had effectively erased her legal existence, making her completely dependent on him for survival. The isolation was complete now. Isabella had no contact with the outside world and no way to ask for help. The staff treated her politely but distantly, clearly under orders not to engage with her beyond basic necessities. She spent most of her time alone in her room, staring out the window at the freedom she could see but never reach. Vincent's behavior became even more disturbing. He started talking about their wedding as if it was definitely happening, showing her magazines with wedding dresses and discussing venues. He spoke about the children they would have and how he would protect them the way he protected her. The way he talked about their future made Isabella feel like she was already dead, just a ghost going through the motions of living. "We'll have a small ceremony," Vincent said one evening as they ate dinner in uncomfortable silence. "Just close family. I don't want too many people knowing our business." Isabella realized that Vincent's idea of a small wedding was really about maintaining control. Fewer witnesses meant fewer people who might notice something was wrong, fewer people who might ask questions or interfere with his plans. But even in her darkest moments, Isabella refused to give up completely. She started paying closer attention to the estate's routines, looking for any weakness in Vincent's security system. She noticed that one of the guards, a younger man named Oliver, seemed uncomfortable with the situation. He often looked away when Vincent was being particularly controlling, and he was the only staff member who ever met Isabella's eyes with anything resembling sympathy. Isabella began testing Oliver in small ways. She would accidentally drop something when he was nearby to see if he would help her pick it up. She would mention being hungry or thirsty to see if he would offer to get her something. Slowly, she realized that Oliver was troubled by what he was witnessing, but felt powerless to intervene. The breakthrough came when Isabella overheard a phone conversation between Oliver and someone he called his sister. He was in the hallway, outside her room, speaking in hushed tones about needing to find a new job because he couldn't stand working for someone like that anymore. That night, Isabella made a desperate decision. When Oliver brought her dinner, she asked him to stay for a moment. "I need help," she said simply. Oliver glanced around nervously. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to—" "I know you see what's happening here," Isabella interrupted. "I know you know this isn't normal. Vincent is holding me here against my will." Oliver's face went pale. "Ma'am, please don't put me in this position." "You're already in this position," Isabella said urgently. "You're working for a man who has kidnapped me, who has destroyed my identification and cut off my contact with the outside world. Who threatens me when I try to leave? For a long moment, Oliver just stared at her. Isabella could see the internal battle playing out on his face. Finally, he spoke. What do you want me to do? Isabella's heart leaped with hope. I need you to contact the police or a domestic violence hotline. Tell them there's a woman being held against her will at this address. Oliver shook his head. He pays the local police department a lot of money for security consulting. They won't believe a story like that without proof. Isabella felt her hope crashing down, but Oliver wasn't finished. But, he continued, there's a women's shelter downtown that helps people in situations like yours. My sister volunteers there sometimes. They know how to handle cases where the abuser has money and connections. Isabella wanted to cry with relief. Can you contact them? I'll try, Oliver said, but it's going to take some time to set up, and you need to be ready to leave immediately when the opportunity comes. There won't be a second chance. Over the next week, Oliver worked carefully to arrange Isabella's escape. He had to be extremely cautious because Vincent's surveillance of the staff had increased since Isabella's failed attempt. But Oliver was smart and patient, using his legitimate duties as a guard to gather information and make connections without arousing suspicion. The plan they developed was simple, but risky. During Vincent's next business trip, Oliver would disable the security cameras covering the service entrance for exactly 10 minutes during a shift change. Isabella would have that narrow window to escape to a car that would be waiting outside the estate gates. The car would take her directly to the women's shelter, where she would be safe and could begin the legal process of obtaining protection from Vincent. But everything went wrong again when Vincent announced that he was canceling all his upcoming business trips. I've decided to work from home for a while, he told Isabella over breakfast. I want to spend more time with you, little bird. I feel like we've been growing apart lately. Isabella's heart sank. Vincent's decision meant that Oliver's plan couldn't work. There would be no opportunity to escape while Vincent was away because he wasn't going away. But Oliver refused to give up. 2 days later, he approached Isabella with a new plan. There's going to be a delivery truck here tomorrow morning, he said quietly. Art pieces for Mr. Kane's collection. During the confusion of unloading, I can create a distraction that will draw the other guards away from the service entrance. What about Vincent? Isabella asked. He has a conference call with investors at 9 a.m. It's scheduled to last at least an hour. That's our window. Isabella felt scared and hopeful at the same time. This plan was much more dangerous than the first one because Vincent would be in the house. If something went wrong, if he discovered what was happening, the consequences for both Isabella and Oliver would be severe. But this might be her last chance. Vincent's behavior was becoming more unstable and possessive every day. He had started talking about renovating the estate to make it more secure, which Isabella suspected meant making it even more like a prison. If she didn't escape soon, she might never be able to leave. The night before the escape attempt, Isabella barely slept. She reviewed the plan over and over in her mind, trying to anticipate everything that could go wrong. She had hidden her few remaining personal belongings in a small bag under her mattress. She had memorized the route to the service entrance and timed how long it would take her to reach it. At 8 a.m., Isabella heard the delivery truck arriving. Her hand shook as she got dressed in dark, practical clothes that would help her move quickly and blend in with shadows. At 8:45, she heard Vincent's voice on the phone in his study, beginning his conference call with the investors. At exactly 9 a.m., the fire alarm in the east wing of the mansion began blaring. Isabella knew this was Oliver's signal. The false alarm would draw the guards away from their posts to investigate the potential emergency. She had exactly 10 minutes to reach the service entrance before they realized it was a false alarm and returned to their positions. Isabella slipped out of her room and moved through the mansion as quickly and quietly as possible. Her heart was beating so loudly she was sure everyone in the house could hear it. Every shadow seemed to hide one of Vincent's guards. Every sound made her think she had been discovered. But Oliver's plan worked perfectly. The hallways were empty. As Isabella made her way to the service entrance, she could hear voices and footsteps in the distance as the guards investigated the false alarm. But no one was watching the route Oliver had mapped out for her. The service door was unlocked, just as Oliver had promised. Isabella stepped outside, into the cool morning air, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. A small, unremarkable car was waiting just outside the estate gates, exactly where Oliver had said it would be. A middle-aged woman sat behind the wheel, and when she saw Isabella running toward her, she leaned over to open the passenger door. "Are you Isabella?" the woman asked. "Yes," Isabella gasped, climbing into the car. "I'm Carol from the women's shelter. We're going to get you somewhere safe."